We are back with part 2 of my breakdown videos for UFC Fight Night, Strickland versus Hernandez. If you haven't watched part 1 of my breakdown videos for this weekend's card yet, make sure you head on over to my channel and check it out. You can see from the title and thumbnail here that I do think Chidi Njokuani to beat Carlos Leal is a very, very good bet. And if you watch that video, you'll see me include video footage to back up the reasons why I think Njokuani is really good value this weekend. If you agree with me, let me know in the comments below. If you disagree with me and you don't think Njokuani is a good bet, please let me know in the comments below why you disagree. So we're going to be breaking down a bunch more fights in this video, tons of fights. We're going to be going into loads of detail from a betting point of view, and I hope you're going to be able to use this information to make better betting decisions this weekend. I'll be honest with you, from a pre-fight betting point of view, the fights we'll be covering in this part 2 of the breakdowns, they're tough for pre-fight betting. But hopefully, if you plan on live betting these fights this weekend, you'll be able to use the information I'm going to share with you as kind of like your live betting strategy guide. Live betting on the UFC should be a big part of what you do now, since platforms like Polymarket are allowing you to live bet on the sport, which is great. And I'm absolutely comfortable with sharing all my fight research with you for live betting in this video, because I've built a very unique system for myself and my community, which not only enables me to access a virtually real-time UFC broadcast, which means I bet ahead of, as you can see, 99% of people that bet on this sport, but also I've built a very unique system, a custom system, where people within my community, within my live betting group, can gain access to my live bets, the kind of live bets that have produced a profit on 68% of events, and in almost every month of the year, my live betting group can gain access to all my bets with sub 1 second audio commentary from myself, letting you know exactly what to bet and why to bet it. And if you don't want spoilers, we got a custom notification system with less than 10 milliseconds of latency. So you don't even need to listen to any audio stream. You can get notified when I place a live bet, and you can tail that bet before 99.9% of people live bet in this sport. I'm very, very confident of that. So hopefully if you're placing your own live bets this weekend, you'll find this video very useful. Now, you may find it useful if you're pre-fight betting these fights, but I do think these fights we're going to be talking about are going to be tough for pre-fight bets. We have, to be fair, got off to a really good start with pre-fight betting this year, though. If you go to our pre-fight betting results page, you'll probably notice that this whole page looks very shit and very different to the rest of my website. This is because I've spent the last sort of 8 months redeveloping the website, bunch of new features, absolutely tons of new features and stuff, but I haven't built the new, or finished building the new pre-fight betting system yet. I started working on it a few weeks ago. It'll be ready soon. It'll look a whole lot like our football betting dashboard, which is finished, which you can go to the website and check out now. We're building one for the UFC, so that's why this looks like old and out of date and broken and shit like that. See a new system coming soon, but we have done really well in the first 3 events of this year. We're up about 16 or 17 units in the first 3 events of the year on pre-fight bets, which is huge. It's been a massive upswing in our favour these just the last 2-3 weeks. Hopefully we can keep it going, although I do think the next 2 cards in particular can be quite difficult for betting. Hopefully Njokuani comes through for us. But if you take a look at our winning bets, obviously so far we've got 2 bets for this weekend. We may find more, but obviously I don't want to go into tons of detail on this. We've covered it in previous videos, but as you can see, very nice profits here on that last event, Bautista versus Oliveira. And I think we very roughly broke even on UFC 325. So I think we made about 7 or 8 units of profit on the last event, UFC Fight Night, Bautista versus Oliveira. We roughly broke even on UFC 325, but then we did really well on this Gaethje versus Paddy card, where you can see we made around, I believe, 10 units. And I'm going to get the calculator out, but it's in that ballpark. We've had a really strong start to the year. As you can see, though, we've also placed quite a high volume of bets on this weekend, on the first three events of the year. You can see we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Any more? 9. Yeah, 10 bets for the Bautista Oliveira card. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9 bets for the Lopez Volkanovski card, and then we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bets for the Gaethje Paddy Pimblett card. So far, we've only got 2 bets for this weekend, which is far less. We might add maybe 1 or 2 more, but we might not. There's not a whole lot of love on this card, so just wanted to let you guys know where I'm at the start of this year. I would love it if both these bets won. I would absolutely love it, but at the same time, we're up so big this year. Always worry when you have a huge upswing, things are going to cool off a little bit. But hopefully they won't cool off anytime soon, and Endra Kawani will come through for us, and Zach Reese and Michelle Pereira will hug it out for 7.5 minutes, which would be absolutely brilliant if they could. But now let's stop rabbiting on, because you're only here for the breakdown videos. You only care about the breakdown videos. Let's get into the goddamn breakdown videos. When I first saw Strickland versus Hernandez was announced, I couldn't wait to bet Hernandez. I was like, take my money. But then I saw the odds. And obviously, we've always got to let the odds do the work for us. The odds are the most important thing to consider in this game. And obviously, Hernandez is a massive favourite. 1.34 odds, minus 290, carries an implied probability of 74%. So by my rules, by my strategy, to get any value on Hernandez at all, you'd want to be giving him like an 80% chance of winning this, which is extremely difficult to do. When you take into consideration how crazy and random the sport of MMA is, as well as a few more factors we're going to get into with Hernandez shortly. So Strickland's a 3.25 plus 225 underdog, which gives him an implied probability of 31%. Now, most of you watch these videos regularly, so you'll already know my perspective on fights like this. It's virtually impossible to be profitable betting guys like Anthony Hernandez long term, because to get any value, any decent margin of value, you've got to give him an 80% chance of winning. And when you throw into the mix the fact that fighters get sick, you get flash KO'd, disqualified, point deductions, bad judging, throw into the mix the fighters compete sick or injured all the goddamn time. I mean, Vinicius Oliveira on the last card fought with a broken arm, after bad weight cuts, all this kind of stuff. It's just very difficult to give anyone in this sport an 80% chance of winning, especially at the top level where the best guys in the world are facing the best guys in the world. And whilst Hernandez is definitely most likely to win this, I said in the offset that Hernandez is a guy that I really wanted to bet when I saw this fight was announced, and I was very disappointed that he was such a big favourite. Even though I can accept Hernandez is very likely to win this, you would have to be mathematically illiterate to give Hernandez an 80% probability of winning this fight, in my opinion. So this breakdown is going to very much focus on whether or not Sean Strickland is worth a bet at these odds, because Hernandez's odds immediately rule us out of betting on him. So if we bring up the fighter comparison tool, we can see both guys are about the same age, although notably Strickland does have a lot more miles on the clock with 36 pro fights. Almost double, around double actually, the number of fights that Hernandez has got. But they're both about the same size as well. Now the stats are obviously really interesting on this matchup, because both guys have had so many fights in the UFC against a really diverse range of opponents. We've got good quality statistical data for these two, with the fact that they've spent so much time in the octagon generating good quality data and stats for us. So we can see that Strickland lands 30% more strikes per minute than Hernandez, albeit a lot of those strikes are just range finding leg kicks and jabs. You can see that Hernandez is 20% more accurate. Again, though, I think that's because a big part of Strickland's style is kind of pumping the jab out there, measuring distance, and he throws a lot of range finding stuff, so naturally a lot of the strikes he throws are going to land, because he's not really intending to land them, he's trying to measure distance. We can see Strickland's 11% better defensively, 61% striking defense is above average for sure. So that's quite impressive there from Strickland, but you can see, no surprise, the persistence of Hernandez is offensive wrestling really puts him in a league of his own. Attempting an average of 6.5 takedowns per 15 minutes is exceptionally high, and it makes him a very difficult challenge for anyone to deal with. However, Strickland's not easy to take down. 76% takedown defense, and notably, Strickland is a guy that usually quickly pops back up to his feet after you take him down, which is a big factor to consider in this matchup. Obviously, Hernandez more aggressive with the submission attempts on the ground as well. In terms of the strike distribution chart, you can see for the most part, both guys very much headhunt, and they do a whole lot of trying to kill you on the feet, headhunting, and not a whole lot else. So, interesting stuff there. Obviously, classic striker versus grappler matchup, and this fight is going to come down to whether or not Strickland is able to keep this fight standing for long enough to exercise his perceived advantage on the feet. Now, when it comes to matchups like this, gotta look at the big picture, just like we have to look at the big picture with every fight, and there are a couple of interesting X factors for us to consider on this matchup. The first X factor is that Anthony Hernandez did this interview with MMA Junkie a while back, where he talked about an injury that he has sustained in the run-up to this fight. So I'm just going to play you the clip, and then we'll talk about what it means after.
Knee, ankle, shoulder, or...
No, I tore something. I'm not even gonna say it because motherfuckers are gonna start targeting it. And like, I know it's good because my fucking teammates have been hitting me in it. I'm a little bit sore still. I'm a little bit sore right now. I'm not gonna lie, but it's okay. It's holding up. So,
all right.
But no, I'm not gonna say it because I just don't want to have people targeting my shit. You know what I mean? It's already like it's already a bitch going out there. You know what I mean? So everyone needs to know is I'm fucking good again. That shit fucking hurt like a bitch. I was like laid up. I'm not gonna lie, like fucking 3 weeks of not being able, 4 weeks of not being able to do any shit. And like, yeah, it was horrible. I couldn't cough. I couldn't sleep. Like trying to roll over and shit was fucking killing me. It was just fucking annoying. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. It's part of the game.
So interesting interview there from Anthony Hernandez when he talks about an injury in the run-up to this fight. Big shout-outs to Kevin, who's done some investigative work on this and has said this interview or this injury happened at the beginning of September, which is obviously like 5 months ago now, 4 or 5 months ago. And this is an interesting interview because if you read the comments, a lot of people in the comments kind of playing this down, saying it was a long time ago, things like that. But when you listen to what Hernandez actually says, there are a couple of interesting things, or three particularly interesting things about what he says, which makes me think this, whatever this injury was, could actually still be an issue for Hernandez and potentially impact his ability to perform to his full potential this weekend against Strickland. So the first thing that he said is that he didn't want to say what the injury was because he didn't want people to disclose it, and his teammates have been hitting him in it and stuff, and it hurts like hell, but it's kind of getting better. I know this was 4 months ago, but that kind of does imply that perhaps there is some kind of weakness in whatever part of the body he got injured in. He also said he blew something out, tore something. We'll get into that in a moment. The second issue is that he also said that he was out of action for like 3 to 4 weeks, where he couldn't do anything, and like rolling over, even sleeping was very painful for him. He basically couldn't move without being in a lot of pain. And so that's quite a significant injury to keep you on the shelf for 4 weeks. The third thing that's concerning about what Hernandez said is that he said he tore something. So in my head, I'm thinking to myself, if you tore something and it's making it difficult for you to like turn over and sleep, logically the only things you really could have torn in my mind that would make it uncomfortable for you to sleep and turn over and stuff would be something arm related, maybe shoulder related. The only thing that would contradict that is where he said that he had people hitting him in it and it would hurt like hell. And he didn't want to disclose the injury so that people wouldn't target it. That makes me think that a shoulder or arm injury is less likely, because whilst obviously you do throw kicks that land on the legs, you do throw kicks that land on the arms, people don't typically target the arms. But if it was something he tore in his legs, I don't think he would, because he specifically said in that interview that it hurt when he laughed and stuff like that, or would breathe. That wouldn't imply the injury was to his legs. It would be to his upper body. And what kind of shit can you tear in your upper body? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Or if you're watching this on my website, slide by the chat room or forum and let me know what you think. Because I'm not sure. But what I do know is this isn't good. And if you are planning on being one of those mathematically illiterate people that are going to be betting on Anthony Hernandez this weekend at an implied probability of 80%, this just adds a huge layer of uncertainty and risk to your bet. And what I am going to do, just so you guys can kind of go back over this and watch it, I'll leave a link to this interview in the description below so you can kind of watch it. Full screen it. Go find the original interview for full context. Do whatever you want to do. It'll be below, and it'll be in the research tool in the analysis and discussion section. I'll post it in the notes by here for those of you watching this on my website. So, in fact, I'll drop that in now, and I'll add my thoughts shortly. There it is. I'll add my thoughts shortly. Alright, it's in. Don't have to worry about losing the link now. Alrighty then. Alrighty then. Alrighty then. Alrighty then. So there's another X Factor. There is another X Factor. No, actually there isn't. Where is it? Have I lost it already? I might have lost the interview I was looking for. Surely not. No way. I've lost it. Apologies. I'll find it very quickly for you. If I just keep scrolling. Ah, here it is. My apologies.
Good, man.
My apologies. My apologies. Let me just full screen this right quick. This is very amateur of me. I do apologize. And I'll drop that in there as well. Guys in my community to check out. I'll pop that in. Alrighty then. Very unprofessional of me. I do apologize. So, one of my biggest criticisms of Sean Strickland, which we're going to get into as we break this fight down, is that his fight IQ isn't the best. Like, at times he shows a lack of urgency. But a huge red flag with fighters, and so many fighters do this, and so many fighters talk like this, is when you ask them, you know, how do they see themselves matching up with their opponent? A standard response is often, I don't care, I'm just going to focus on me. I don't know much about my opponent, I let my coaches handle that. You know, they handle the game plan, the strategy and all that stuff. I just listen to my coaches, right? That's a standard response that we hear from a lot of, you know, a hell of a lot of, you know, fighters. And I really like it when a fighter is asked about how they think they match up with their opponent, and they give a very detailed, specific answer that is also accurate. And what I like about what Sean Strickland has said in this interview is he pretty much nails what to expect from Hernandez. He also explains how he thinks the fight is going to play out, and he also explains why he thinks he's going to win if the fight plays out the way it is most likely to play out. Anyway, I'll play you the clip and then we can chat about it after.
Camp, so I do way more wrestling than I do striking in my camp. So so what better of a name can you have to beat? No, it's good. You know, I would say I do way more wrestling than I do striking in my camp. So really, it's just having the gas tank to wrestle for 5 rounds. You know, generally he'll take guys down and break them, but I'm not someone who breaks, so it should be fun. The middleweight division's on lock. Oh no, I think I'm gonna out grapple him. I think we will grapple. I'm not the hardest guy to take down. I don't care if I get taken down. I think it's gonna be a 5-round grappling match. I'll out grapple him and I'll TKO him in the 4th or 5th.
So what was really interesting about that interview is he accepted that Hernandez will try really hard to grapple him hard, but he doesn't seem bothered by it. He sounds like he knows what to expect and he is confident in his ability to deal with it. And that's very interesting to me, because Anthony Hernandez is a fighter that very much weaponizes his cardio. Sean Strickland even said this himself in the interview we just watched, where Hernandez puts a crazy pace on his opponents, spams takedowns, wears them down with his wrestling, and in the end breaks guys, right? If you look at his record, he definitely did this to Michel Pereira. You know, he kind of did it to Brendan Allen, did it to Roman Dolidze as well. He just puts this insane pace on guys that they can't keep up with, and he just drowns them in pressure, right? You look at the number of takedowns that this guy attempts per fight: 11, 8, 29 takedown attempts against Pereira is absurd. That's like Davashvili levels. 14, 15, 14, 11, 10, 9, 35. Sorry, that's significant strikes. You get the idea, right? And that was takedowns defended, so discard that one as well. But 9, 11, 14, 15, 14, 29, 8, 11. High volume takedown attempts from Hernandez. And even though his percentages in most fights aren't great, you know, 50% success rate there, 30-odd% success rate there, probably 25% success rate there, 30% success rate there, 50% success rate there, right? He doesn't successfully complete a very good percentage of the takedowns he attempts. But the reason why he's so effective is even when you're stuffing takedowns, you're exerting energy to stuff the takedown, right? So in the case of Pereira, you can see why he was so tired in the second half of the fight, because he had to exert so much energy defending takedowns, and Hernandez just keeps coming. He just wears you down, right? It's the old John Fitch strategy. It's the old Jake Shields strategy. They weaponize their cardio. It's the Davashvili strategy, right? He's the best current example, and it's highly effective. But Strickland is a very different type of opponent, because he's also got elite cardio. So when you look at a lot of the guys that Hernandez has been facing and beating, Dolidze, people love him. But if you go and look at Dolidze's past fights, he does slow down as fights wear on. Allen's cardio is generally good, but his takedown defense isn't, which is what got him into trouble in this matchup. Pereira, gassed out, couldn't deal with the pace. Kopylov, same as Brendan Allen, decent cardio, doesn't have the defensive wrestling to deal with someone like Hernandez. Shabazian, we all know Shabazian slows down as fights wear on. Andre Barrio, not good enough to compete with Hernandez on the ground. And then we get into, you know, guys like Rodolfo Vieira, again, has been known to slow down in fights. And so Strickland's cardio and defensive wrestling, ability to work his way back up to his feet, and that 76% takedown defense, it offers up a unique combination of challenges that we haven't really seen Hernandez deal with before. Because most of the guys that he's been spamming takedowns on either haven't had the level of grappling to compete with him on the ground, Strickland does, or they haven't had the level of takedown defense to keep the fight standing for long enough for any striking advantage to mean anything, which is the case with Kopylov, Strickland does, or they don't have the cardio to stop themselves from being worn down by Hernandez, but Strickland does. So this is a completely new test for Hernandez, where he may be forced to stand and strike for long periods of time, and we haven't really seen anyone force him to do that for a very, very long time. And you'd have to anticipate that Strickland would have the advantage on the feet. We know Strickland can be taken down. It's not easy. It's very difficult to hold Strickland down. So in that interview where Strickland is talking about, you know, foreseeing a lot of grappling in this fight, but having the cardio, having the defensive wrestling to grapple hard for 3 rounds and then drag Hernandez into the 4th and 5th and getting a late stoppage. It's realistic. Like, I could see it happening. And Strickland is a very tempting bet this weekend. He is a very tempting bet. My issue with Strickland is he doesn't do a whole lot of damage on the feet. Like, it's not like if Hernandez... Well, it's not like if Strickland starts to have success with his grappling, he has like devastating weapons on the feet to really punish Hernandez, right? It's death by 1,000 cuts with Strickland, his volume strikes, his jabs, his range-finding kicks. But it's not like someone with raw power like Roman Dolidze, who could potentially really make Hernandez pay if he wasn't able to get the fight to the ground in a matchup like that, or someone like Roman Kopylov, who's quite a dynamic striker that has mean, nasty, damaging, hard, impactful kicks. Strickland is something different. So while Strickland is a very tempting bet, I think we can all agree this fight's very likely to go to decision, because it's unlikely Hernandez will be able to submit Strickland on the ground with how skilled of a grappler Strickland is. And with Strickland lacking finishing power on the feet, it's unlikely Strickland would knock Hernandez out in if the fight stays standing. So then you've got to ask yourself, well, what are Strickland's paths to victory? Well, knocking Hernandez out is unlikely. TKOing him is also unlikely. Submitting Hernandez is unlikely. Realistically, if Strickland is going to win this fight, it's going to have to be by decision. And so, does Strickland have the defensive wrestling and the ability to win 3 of 5 rounds beyond all reasonable doubt? That's where it gets tricky for me, because Hernandez has proven, certainly, to have the cardio to persistently put it on his opponent for at least 3 rounds, which is all he would really probably need to do in order to win a decision here. But then you throw into the mix the injury thing. If it is a shoulder or an arm or something, those are prone to getting re-injured. If he has to grapple hard and he injured his shoulder 3-4 months ago, I mean, look at TJ Dillashaw. He could easily, tear something or pop something out again. So, yeah, it's one of those fights where undeniably all the value sits with Sean Strickland. The question is whether he's worth a bet. And I haven't made my mind up on this yet. I really haven't. A few weeks ago, we put the breakdown out for the Sean O'Malley, Justin Gaethje bets at UFC 324. Both guys came through for us, and we had a really profitable card there. But at the time of recording my breakdowns for those fights, I hadn't made my mind up on betting Gaethje yet. I wasn't sure. And I'm in the same sort of position here with Sean Strickland. Like, the odds feel disrespectful. The odds feel wide. But like I said at the very beginning of this breakdown, I like Hernandez a lot, and I think Hernandez is going to win. I think Hernandez is very good. That's where I'm trapped in this real conflict in my mind, where I'm drawn to Strickland because he has a lot going for him, specifically in this odds range, and the potential injury Hernandez adds a little cherry on top of that. But undeniably, Hernandez is very good. So if we look at some of the big underdog bets we've had in recent weeks, Kunaev as an example last week. If you go watch the breakdown video for that fight, there were very specific weaknesses in Jailton Almeida, which Kunaev was very well positioned to exploit. Offley and Nakamura were pure value plays at underdog odds, and both of them came through for us, which is great. Mikhailov is a slight favourite, so he doesn't count. We want to look at like comparables in that underdog odds range, right? And then we've got Gaethje, who's a comparable again. O'Malley isn't, because he was a big favourite. But you look at Gaethje, and there were so many weaknesses in Paddy Pimblett's style and skill set that Gaethje was well positioned to exploit. So there were real, solid, justifiable reasons to take shots on underdogs like Kunaev, Offley, Nakamura, and Gaethje. And there are this weekend with Njokuani as a slight underdog. But it's far more difficult to justify a bet on Strickland, because there aren't any major weaknesses in Hernandez that Strickland is well positioned to exploit. There might not be a huge skill differential when it comes to striking. I think there is. I would favour Strickland significantly. I think he's a far better boxer than Hernandez, far more durable, far more battle tested. But again, like I said earlier in the video, Strickland is passive and tentative at times. And Hernandez is a workhorse. One of the things I love about him. So I haven't made my mind up on this one yet. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I do apologise for that, because I can't give you clarity on what I'm doing from a betting point of view on this matchup as it stands right now, 3 days before the event. How many days? Yeah, about 3 days before the event. But if you're a member of my community, obviously, and if I do decide to bet this fight, I will obviously send you an email notification to let you know. But at the moment, I just need to do some more thinking. Maybe it'll end up like the Bautista versus Vinicius Oliveira fight on the last card, where all week I was on Vinicius Oliveira and I was planning to bet Oliveira, and as soon as I saw how terrible he looked at the weigh-ins and, you know, him saying that he thought he was going to die cutting weight and stuff, bam, immediately we hedge out of the bet on Oliveira, flip sides of Bautista. Maybe I'll see something at the weigh-ins which will help me make my mind up on this one, but for now, as it stands 3 days before the event, I just don't know. What I do know is I can't bet Hernandez, but Strickland, very, very, very tempting. Maybe help me out with this, and like I say, slide on by the chat room or the forum, let me know what you think. And if you don't do that and you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments below. I think it's time we stop rabbiting on about this one. Moving on. Should I bet Strickland? Should I not? I'm not so sure. Let's move on to the next fight. Now let's break down the fight between Jeff Neal and Uros Medic. And I am very much conflicted, torn, and uncertain on so many of the fights on this weekend's card, which to some extent is a good thing. It presents a really good environment for live betting this card, because when you've got a lot of uncertainty, it means the fights are likely to play out in unpredictable, chaotic ways, which means you'll get a lot of momentum swings that hopefully we'll be able to capitalize on in live betting. So the uncertainty I'm facing this week is good, because uncertainty doesn't necessarily mean a lack of understanding. There's plenty of footage available on Medic, plenty of footage available on Neal, so that when the fight is taking place, we're going to know strengths and weaknesses of both guys. Sometimes, though, when you throw those strengths and weaknesses together in a pot, difficult to kind of work out how two guys match up against one another. And this is definitely one of those fights, for reasons I will get into as we work through this breakdown. So we'll start off with the odds. Jeff Neal's a 1.44 favourite, which is minus 225 for an implied probability of 69%. Medic, 2.78 underdog, which is plus 178 for an implied probability of 36%. Notably, Jeff Neal's odds have declined by 10 to 15% in the last sort of 24 hours, which is a pretty big fucking move, actually, for around 3 days before a fight takes place. Typically, you only really see rapid odds movement like that either on the day of the fight or like weeks before, maybe 2 weeks before. 3 days before, usually it's like a flatline stagnation of the odds, generally speaking, or like a slow, steady move in either direction. To just see a 10-15% move in 1 day is a bit unusual when it's midweek. But here we are with Jeff Neal, just something to think about. This is a very interesting fight. For me, it's a big step up in competition for Uros Medic. Jeff Neal is absolutely legit. And it should be a fight that will take place on the feet, which means we've got an exciting stand-up battle here between two absolute top-tier elite strikers. So what do the stats tell us? Well, the stats tell us that both guys are about the same age. 35 years old. It's getting old for a welterweight, but nothing crazy. Both guys are about the same height. We can see Jeff Neal has a 4-inch reach advantage. Medic slightly longer leg reach advantage. So size not really an issue in this matchup. They're both southpaws, which is very interesting. You don't usually get to see southpaw versus southpaw, because only 20 to 30% of fighters tend to be southpaws. And whenever you do get southpaws face each other, because southpaws aren't used to facing southpaws, usually the more experienced striker has the edge, because older, more experienced southpaws are more used to fighting other southpaws. So Medic has only had 15 pro fights. Neil's had a lot more. He's a lot more experienced. Southpaw versus southpaw dynamic could favour Neil here. Now, when we look at the striking stats, it's really important to remember, obviously these stats are generated off, the cumulative total of everything both these guys have done through all their UFC fights up until this point. So I don't think the striking stats are that useful on this one, just because Medic has faced a much lower level of opposition than Jeff Neal has. So where you can see Medic is slightly more accurate, lands slightly more strikes per minute than Neal. My question would be, would he be able to achieve those numbers and be slightly better than Jeff Neal if he was facing guys like Carlos Prates, Ian Gary, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Vicente Luque, Santiago Ponzinibbio? Probably not. He's been generating those stats against guys like, Gilbert Urbina, Punahil Soriano, Tim Means, Semmelsberger, Morales. You get the idea. So not as impressive. But in terms of the strike distribution, you can see that Medic is a more dynamic striker that lands a more diverse range of strikes. We can see he attacks the body, he's got devastating kicks. For the most part, Jeff Neal is a very one-dimensional boxer, doesn't throw a lot of kicks, and 91% of his strikes are targeted to the head, so he just headhunts, and he doesn't do a whole lot else, which it's a big flaw, because it's much harder to set up power head strikes in MMA unless you're attacking other parts of the body, right? Attacking the legs, attacking the body, getting your opponent thinking about their legs and body, and then going up top. Jeff Neal, very, very one-dimensional boxer, which is probably why his success in the UFC has been limited, and why he does have not the best record of 16-7. So we've already said this is likely to be a stand-up fight. If it goes to the ground, Neal will have the advantage, because Medic is appallingly bad on the ground. However, as you can see, it's very rare that Neal will try to take anyone down. He shot one takedown on Prates, one on Dos Anjos, 3 on Luque, 2 on Magny. Outside of that, never really tries to take his opponents down. Medic is very bad on the ground, but Neal is a stubborn old guy, likes to stand and bang, wants a boxing match. Uros Medic, probably not going to give him a boxing match, but we'll give him a kickboxing match, and we'll be more than happy not to grapple. Medic never tries to take anyone down. If you look at the stats, 1 missed takedown on Tim Means, 1 on Semmelsberger, that's about it. He just wants to stand and bang. So both these guys are very different strikers. We've said Jeff Neal, heavy boxer, Medic, very dynamic. But in their stance, the range they like to fight in, their approach to striking, their aggression, they're both very different as well. Jeff Neal, for the most part, is a high-pressure fighter that wants to walk you down, draw you into exchanges, and box with you. He wants to fight you in boxing range. Medic is more happy to counter-strike more than Neal, bounce around, stay light on his feet, chip away at you with a really diverse range of attacks. I'm not going to say Medic uses his length well, but he certainly fights longer than Neal. Neal wants to fight you in a phone booth, boxing style. Medic quite happy to get on his bike, chip away at you with like range-finding kicks and longer punches. So Neal will probably be the aggressor on this one. Medic will probably be looking to counter-strike. In terms of like the powerful, or kind of like the impactfulness and the power behind the strikes of both guys, Neal does hit hard, but Medic lands harder, more damaging, more impactful strikes. In my opinion, he's more explosive. Now, unfortunately for Medic, that explosiveness does come at a cost, and he has been known to slow down as fights wear on, although in pure stand-up fights, the Matthew Semmelsberger fight being a good example, his cardio did hold up pretty well. Jeff Neal's cardio is fantastic. Don't need to worry about that with Mr. Neal. His cardio is very, very, very good. So, Yeah, it's the reason why I'm having such a difficult time working this fight out before it takes place is I don't know how well Medic will deal with the forward pressure and aggression of Neal. And I don't know durable's not the right word. Alright, let's just get into it, and then I'll kind of say my main concern with Neal. Right, so basically, James Lynch, I'll leave a link to this interview. I used Home of the Fight because I thought this was James Lynch's organization, but he might not be. And obviously I want to credit the original person of the interview, but I don't know if James Lynch attached this. Either way, I'll figure it out, and I'll leave a link to this in the description below. So just put on my little notepad over here. So if you want to watch this interview again, you go check out in the link in the description below. Lynch on Sports, James Lynch on YouTube, all that shit. He did this interview. Anyway, I'm going to play this interview for you now. We'll also pop this in the UFC research tool if you're watching this on my website. Pop that in there so you can watch it over on my website if you need to. Bam, there it is. So yeah, just going to play this for you now, and then we'll chat about what he says once they're done talking.
75 Hard. For people who don't know, 75 Hard is, I've done it before too. It's like a 75-day program. You work out twice a day. You have to read 10 pages a day of a book. And you have to go strict on a diet for 75 days and no drugs or alcohol. So that's part of it, right? So
Yep.
yeah. So
And like I wouldn't say so
yeah.
We did 75 soft. Like it's like, you know what I mean? It was there's certain things like the reading, like I was like, fuck that. No. Yeah. But
I like the honesty.
But most of the stuff I did, especially my keys was the no drugs and alcohol. You know what I mean? Like, and like a relatively good diet, relatively.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
okay.
Yeah, it was this. Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And then I was going to say too, like how long have you been sober? I don't know if you're keeping track of the days, but it's been a while, I'm assuming. So it's been more than you've done the 75 Hard, but how long has it been?
Yeah. So 75 Hard was like the beginning of the 75 was like the first day I was sober. So like, I would say like now I'm pushing 100 now.
Good for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Good.
Yeah. Like I'm not keeping track because I don't want it to be a thing where it's I want it to be a forever thing. You know what I mean? I don't want it to be just, let me keep track of the days. Not like is this I want it to be my lifestyle. You know what I mean? I don't want to think about how long I've been sober. I just want to be sober.
75 Hard.
So, you know, if you're in my community, if you hang out in the chat room, you'll know that I always say it's really, 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 really difficult to make money betting on sports. Very, very difficult. And I think a lot of people that watch gambling related content online, or they go on like gambling Twitter, they get like a false perception of reality, because when you go on, you know, gambling Twitter, or you watch breakdown videos on YouTube, it makes it look and sound like everybody is making money betting on sports. You got these guys going like boom and bang and brap 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 and all this shit, talking about wins, talking about how much money they make betting on sports, and it gives off this artificial perception that it's like easy and everyone's doing it, right? It fucking isn't. Take it from someone that has been making a profit betting on the UFC for 15 years. Take it from, so I'm 42 years old this year. I barely leave my house, chained to my desk. The amount of time and effort that I put into being profitable betting on sports, it's an ungodly amount of work. It is not a glamorous, nice or happy lifestyle. Betting on sports is difficult. It requires a lot of discipline, a lot of hard work, a lot of time, a lot of pain, a lot of research. And why am I saying that? why is that relevant to what Jeff Neal just said about sobriety? It's significant because it's extremely difficult to make a profit betting on this sport when you've got tons of information available to you, right? So if you want to talk about pre-fight betting on the UFC, you could know everything about fighter A and you could know everything about fighter B, and you could be a total high-level expert on the sport. You could be the most knowledgeable, smartest, intelligent person when it comes to the UFC. You can know everything about the UFC, everything about combat sports, and you could be an elite tier better. And still, any professional gambler, any profitable gambler that has any amount of realism and authenticity in their DNA will tell you, even if you're the greatest sports bettor of all time, even if you know more about the sport than anyone else, and even if you have tons of information on fighter A and fighter B and how they match up, a good percentage of the time, I'm talking 20, 30, 40% of the time, in light of all that stuff, when those two guys are locked in a cage together and they engage in a cage fight to the death, the fight will go absolutely nothing like the research suggested it would. And that's why we love sports. That's why we love the UFC. It's chaos. It's unpredictable. It's entertainment. Imagine how boring it would be if every time there was a fight, it just played out exactly how we thought it would be. How shit would that be? Yet you still have loads of jabronis online that claim God complex and boom and this and that and we called it and we're so smart we get everything right, blah, blah, blah. Why is this relevant to what Jeff Neal said? It's relevant because it's hard enough to make a profit betting on the UFC when you have tons of information to work with and you know everything about how two fighters match up and there are zero unknowns and you've got everything you need to make a really informed decision. When you throw into the mix fighters like Jeff Neal dabble in, look, he didn't specifically say drugs in that video, but he referenced drugs. He referenced not having the best diet. When you throw into the mix that a fighter has potential issues with, you know, a bad diet, alcohol, drugs, straight away they become impossible to bet on. If you're serious about betting, there is no way you can bet on Jeff Neal this weekend because he has just literally fucking waved a huge red flag in your face in that interview and basically told you that if you bet on me at an implied probability of 69%, I might have taken drugs, I might have been drunk a few times, I might not have had the best diet in the run-up to this fight. And at the highest level of sports, we're talking about the Seattle Seahawks versus the New England Patriots. We're talking about Barcelona versus Real Madrid. I don't know anything about basketball, but the LA Lakers versus New York Knicks, they may be shit now. I don't know. When I was a kid, was it the Orlando Magic with Michael Johnson, Magic Johnson? I don't know. Anyway, it's irrelevant. The highest level shit, in order to compete with the baddest motherfuckers, highest level teams, highest level athletes in the world, you have to do everything right. You have to take it serious. There are unicorns and exceptions to the rule, like Tyson Fury, that can still perform at an elite level whilst not have the healthiest lifestyle, or a John Jones that can still, you know, do cocaine and go clubbing every night, and still be, you know, the best pound for pound fighter ever. But they're fucking rare. They're really, really, really fucking rare. And when fighters start to mess about with alcohol and drugs and their diet slips, what it basically means is if they're not declining rapidly, it's inevitable that they will decline rapidly. And it also adds a massive layer of uncertainty to predicting how they're going to perform from fight to fight, because this shit will catch up with you. And if Uros Medic is in the gym every day killing himself, murdering himself on the fucking treadmill, trying to get better every day, eating clean, being very disciplined with his lifestyle, that gives him a huge edge over Jeff Neal before we even consider how these two match up from a stylistic point of view. So the issue with an interview like that is, it sounds like that's just been Jeff Neal's lifestyle for a long time. And he's looked very good at times in the UFC. He's also a guy that's been a bit inconsistent. Perhaps this has not really affected him much throughout his career. But I guarantee you it will at some point, and I guarantee you Neil will be one of those guys that one day shows up looking a shadow of himself, and that's it. It's over. It's cooked. Will it be this weekend against Uros Medic? I don't know. But I ain't paying an implied probability of 70% to find out. So again, after that, and I'm not criticising anyone for betting Jeff Neal that hasn't watched that interview. But I am criticising anyone that has bet Jeff Neal if you have watched that interview. Because there is no fucking way that anyone with a brain can bet Jeff Neal after he has literally told you his diet might not be the best and he has issues with drugs / alcohol. Delete one or more or both as appropriate, right? Can't do it, Brev. Can't do it. So this fight becomes a question of, do you bet Uros Medic or not? You can't bet Jeff Neal. It's impossible. If you have eyes and a brain, and he is, or any two of those three things, you can't bet Jeff Neal. Impossible. Even if you're his mum, you can't bet on him. It's not smart. If you like money, if you hate money, go bet guys like Jeff Neal. If you like money, walk away. Medic is very good. Dynamic striker. Lands hard, damaging, nasty, impactful kicks. Moves well. Is likely improving from fight to fight. I'm struggling with this one because Neal's good. He is good. I understand why he's the favourite if both guys show up and perform their full potential. But with the red flags raised in that interview, Neal fits the profile of someone that will frequently not show up and perform to his full potential. So it's a very, very tricky fight for me. Clearly dog or pass. It's an IQ test. And again, it's another one of those fights where I am tempted to bet Medic. I'm not going to, though. This one is an easy pass. Not as difficult of a pass as Strickland. This one's an easy pass just because, in light of all the issues we've just spoken about and red flags with Neal, he has been a cardio machine throughout his career, whereas Medic has slowed often, although notably cardio held up reasonably well in one of the very few fights in his career which went deep, which was the Samuelsberger fight. In fact, he actually finished Samuelsberger in round 3, which is pretty impressive for a guy that had a reputation or has a reputation for slowing. So yeah, interesting fight. Dog or pass. Take Medic or nothing. Hope you found that useful. Let's move on to the next one. Now let's break down the fight between Jacob Smith and Josiah Harrell. So Harrell, making his UFC debut, big favourite over Jacob Smith. He's a 1.34 favourite, which is minus 290 for an implied probability of 74%. Smith, 3.24 underdog, which is plus 224 for an implied probability of 31%. So there's no point in us looking at the stats on this one because it's Josiah Harrell's UFC debut, so we don't have any data available on him. And Jacob Smith himself has only had a couple fights in the UFC that have all ended pretty quickly, so not much to learn from his stats either. So this is one of those matchups where, based on past performances, I do understand why Harrell is the favourite. Smith does slow down his fights we're on. Offensive wrestling's not the best. Striking a bit sloppy, not the best defensively. Harrell, very skilled, very well-rounded. Trains with Matt Brown. Should have decent cardio because he trains at Denver, Colorado, but he is taking the fight on relatively short notice. And it is his UFC debut, which makes him more prone to adrenaline dumping. Based on past performances, Harrell is the more skilled fighter. Decent MMA grappler. More technical on the ground than Smith. Maybe not as physically imposing as Smith on the ground, but more technical, difficult to take down, hold down. More technical striker. Jacob Smith, definitely sloppy, very bad defensively. So this is one of those fights where, based on past performances, I understand why Harrell is the favourite, but again, to get any value on him, you'd have to give him around an 80% chance of winning, which is absurd. So the only thing you should be focusing on with a fight like this is whether or not there's value on Jacob Smith. And it's one of those situations where, again, the odds do feel very wide, predominantly because of X factors like this being Harrell's UFC debut and the fact that he's coming in on short notice. There's no doubt that he is better than Smith everywhere, but the odds feel very, very wide. You know, a guy like Harrell with an implied probability of 80%, for that implied probability you'd expect there to be no major risk factors here, and there absolutely are with him being his debut on short notice. Is the fact that Smith has a tendency to slow down his fights we're on, somewhat going to offset the risk factor that comes from this being Harrell's short notice debut, perhaps. But at the same time, I wouldn't touch Harrell at this odds range, and I'm not particularly in the mood to bet a relatively low-level fighter like Smith at underdogs odds either. So this is a pretty easy pass for me. Let's move on to a more interesting fight. Now let's break down the fight between Zach Reese and Michel Pereira. So we can see that Pereira is a 1.65 favourite, which is minus 155 for an implied probability of 61%. We can see that Zach Reese is a 2.25 underdog, which is plus 125 for an implied probability of 44%. So into this fighter comparison tool, we can see that both guys are about the same age. Reese is taller and also has a very nice 4-inch reach advantage, which compounds. And then if we take a look at the stats, again, this one isn't too meaningful because Reese has fought a relatively low level of opponent compared to Michel Pereira. So obviously Reese's stats are going to be a bit more inflated, a bit more favourable because he's been competing against a lower level of opponent, and he wouldn't have been able to rack up those kind of stats against the level of opponent Pereira has faced. So the stats not too meaningful on this one, although the strike distribution chart is interesting because it shows that both Pereira and Reese land a good percentage of their strikes to the body, very, very much above average for both guys. So in terms of how these two match up stylistically, obviously both guys are primarily strikers. They're both very bad on the ground, but Reese is particularly bad, very weak off his back, super bad takedown defense. So if the fight did go to the ground, with how difficult Pereira proved to be to take down and hold down until he got very tired in the Anthony Hernandez fight, I would give Pereira a big advantage on the ground, although I doubt it will go to the ground. This is almost certainly going to be a stand-up fight. In a stand-up fight, it's difficult to predict how this one is going to go because Pereira is very inconsistent. Sometimes he comes out the gate super hard, super aggressive, trying to kill everyone in round one. And when he does that, he's very, very dangerous. He almost finished Anthony Hernandez in the first couple of rounds when he fought Hernandez in that main event. But then we've also seen a different side to him recently against Abus Magomedov, where he was very passive, very tentative, did a whole lot of nothing. This is one of those fights which is a great stylistic matchup for Pereira if he comes to fight, because he's got better cardio than Reese, in my opinion, significantly better ground game, and he's also a much better striker than Reese. Where this fight gets dicey though is whether the performance, the strange performance against Abus Magomedov, where he basically did nothing for the first 2 rounds, is a sign that Pereira is declining. One of the main kind of signs that a fighter is starting to decline is when they just all of a sudden become much less aggressive, and when they can no longer pull the trigger like they used to, when they see the openings but they can't think fast enough because their reflexes are gone to pull the trigger on the opening that they've seen. So even though Pereira isn't old for a middleweight at 32 years old, has had a lot of fights. He's had over 40 pro fights, which is a huge amount of wear and tear on the body, a huge amount of miles on the clock. So was the Abus Magomedov fight a bad night at the office, an anomaly? A 40-second KO loss to Kaldurkas doesn't tell us a whole lot. This is one of those fights where if Pereira shows up and fights to his full potential, he should win easily. But that Abus Magomedov fight does make me a bit nervous. So I heavily lean towards Pereira. He's a very tempting bet. I wouldn't touch Reese here because, in my opinion, there's no advantage that he has over Pereira. But he is a younger, hungrier, more aggressive fighter. I mean, younger in his career, not necessarily in terms of age on paper, but very much younger in his career. And so as a result, Pereira is one of these guys that, if he's on a decline, Reese could make him pay. He's aggressive, he's tough, he's mean, he's nasty. Shows a lot of heart to hang in there against Jackson McVeigh in his last fight when he's taking a lot of damage in the clinch from elbows. Heavily lean Pereira here, but can't bet him because that Magomedov fight is a big red flag. And if Pereira is entering that stage in his career where he's become very inconsistent and he's declining, it's always going to be 50-50 whether he's going to show up and perform to his full potential. if he shows up and performs like he has done in the majority of his fights, I think he beats Reese fairly easily. If he shows up and performs like he did against Abus Magomedov, he almost certainly loses a decision. So at an implied probability of 61%, having that 50-50 uncertainty for the inconsistency makes him unbettable. No value here. Let's move on to the next one. Now let's break down the fight between Ramiz Brahimaj versus Punahil Soraniano. So both these guys are in the even money odds range. We can see Brahimaj 1.78 favourite, which is minus 128 for an implied probability of 56%. Soraniano 2.05 underdog, which is plus 105 for an implied probability of 48%. So if we look at the fighter comparison tool, both guys are about the same age and about the same size. Now if we take a look at the stats, we can see that Soraniano far more aggressive on the feet, landing double the amount of strikes than Brahimaj per minute. He's also a southpaw. He's slightly more accurate with his strikes, slightly better defensively. We can see that Brahimaj more aggressive in attacking with takedowns and submissions, but we have seen grappling heavy game plans from Soraniano in his last few fights against Miguel Beza and Veretennikov in particular. So this is a very interesting matchup. Both these guys are primarily grapplers, and it's an interesting fight because if Soraniano is able to perform like he has in some of his recent matchups against Veretennikov and also Miguel Beza, I do think he wins this fight very easily, which is making this a very, very tempting bet. Soraniano certainly has the advantage on the feet. Brahimaj a little bit passive, a little bit tentative, more of a volume striker, whereas Soraniano is mean, nasty, aggressive, and has the power to hurt you on the feet. But Brahimaj's cardio is battle tested and proven. Brahimaj can go hard for 3 rounds. Soraniano has been known to slow in the past, but Brahimaj has been looking more aggressive in recent fights. Soraniano has been improving his cardio in recent fights. Both guys are reasonably skilled grapplers. Soraniano, former NCAA, I believe Division 3 level wrestler, and has used, like I say, very grappling heavy game plans in some of his recent fights, and now actually has the cardio to pull it off. Brahimaj's takedown offense, not the best. We saw some issues with him on the ground in both the Temba Garimbo fight and his last fight against Austin Vanderford. And so there is a potential that Soraniano could use a grappling heavy game plan in this one to cause Brahimaj big problems. I think this fight will come down to cardio. If Soraniano's gas tank holds up, he will likely outstrike and outgrapple Brahimaj, beat the fight everywhere, or win the fight everywhere, and win very dominantly and decisively. But if Soraniano's cardio starts to fail him like it did in some of his fights at middleweight, he's now citing the drop to welterweight as a reason why his cardio is so much better, then Brahimaj is skilled enough, has the work rate, has the cardio to make Soraniano pay. So heavily lean towards Soraniano here. He's a very, very tempting bet for me, but Brahimaj can make Soraniano work hard in ways neither Veretennikov nor Miguel Beza could, and that makes Brahimaj a potentially tough opponent for Soraniano. Both these guys are making big improvements in different areas, and so this one's a difficult fight to predict because they're both evolving like butterflies, and we don't, or maybe evolving like a Pikachu. Evolving like a Pokemon would be a better analogy. Both these guys are improving, so it's difficult to gauge what version of them on Saturday night show up. Do they look better than ever? Are they better than we've seen them in recent fights? Or do old habits die hard, and some of those weaknesses we've seen from Brahimaj and Soraniano in the past, Soraniano's cardio, Brahimaj's passive tentative style, does that creep in and cost either of these guys on Saturday night? We'll find out. Let me know who you lean towards. I've got Soraniano. I'm probably not going to be betting this one, but it is a great fight. Hopefully we'll be able to make some money on it in live betting. Now let's break down the fight between Phil Rowe and Jean-Paul Lebosniani. Probably butchered that pronunciation of his name, so I do apologize to Jean-Paul. But he is a 1.49 favourite, which is minus 205 for an implied probability of 67%. Rowe is a 2.65 underdog, which is plus 165 for an implied probability of 38%. So Jean-Paul Lebosniani coming in on short notice to face Phil Rowe. And obviously it's not easy to make a UFC debut on short notice, but there are so many weaknesses that Lebosniani is well positioned to exploit in Rowe that I kind of get it. The first and most obvious is that his takedown offense and ground game is a joke. I know he has a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know he trained with Ronaldo Jacare Souza for a long time, but this guy's takedown offense is so bad, and if you do take him down, he will literally lie on his back, making no attempt to get back up to his feet, just hunting for long shot arm bars and triangles off his back, doing a whole lot of nothing. Now that probably won't matter in this fight because Jean Paul is predominantly a striker that never tries to take his opponents down. Jean Paul likes to stay on the outside, bounce around, counter strike, Lyoto Machida style, never shoots takedowns. But if he did use grappling in this fight, shoot takedowns, he'd probably be able to take Rowe down and hold him down. In fact, my sister would probably be able to take Rowe down and hold him down. It's not difficult. In terms of how these two match up when it comes to striking, Rowe is very long, very tall, as a result, very slow, very easy to hit, very bad defensively. And Jean Paul has true legit knockout power. He moves in and out of range very quickly. He's a dangerous striker, and Rowe is a bit of a sitting duck to the knockout. I mean, he was even rocked very, very bad in his fight against Ange Looser, and Ange Looser is a volume striker without any power in his hands. Jean Paul is a legit knockout artist. You take a look at his record, he knocked out a guy on the Contender Series. If you look previously at his record, bunch of finishes inside the distance, some knockouts as well. The guy does hit very hard. He's a dynamic striker. So this is one of those fights where the odds make sense for me. I think Jean Paul will likely land the harder, more damaging shots on the feet, most likely knock Rowe out on the feet. Rowe's got great cardio. He put a lot of pressure on Ange Looser, to make Looser fade and take over in the second half of that fight, which is impressive. Looser does have good cardio. He's good under pressure. Can he make Lebos Noyani fade in the same way? It's very possible with Jean Paul coming on short notice. But having said that, in order for Rowe to wear Jean Paul down, he's going to have to put himself in the firing line and exchange with Jean Paul. And when he does that, there's a very high chance he'll get knocked out. So I do heavily lean towards Jean Paul here, but there's no way I'm betting a guy at an implied probability of 67% who's coming in on short notice to make their debut. So Jean Paul should win, but it's too steep for a price for me to pay. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, hit the like button below and let me know what you've got for bets this weekend. Check out my website, MMABettingTips.com, link in the description below. If you want to make money on almost every UFC event, you know what to do. Join the live betting group. Why aren't you in the live betting group? If you're not already in it, why not get in it? You will love it. I'll be back with another breakdown for that Mexican card very soon. Have a great weekend. I love you all. Hopefully we'll see you in the chat room or in the live betting group. If not, see you in another breakdown very, very soon. Nice one, guys. Take care. Love you all. Bye.